Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmridhamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. This is getting more and more interesting by the minute. Okay, so we're starting up again. For those of you who are keeping score at home, we're at Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 3, and we just took a break for 10 minutes, and now we're coming back at text number 16. 17? Is it? Okay. Text 17. Although the 6 qualities of education, austerity, wealth, beauty, youth, and heritage are for the highly elevated, one who is proud of possessing them becomes blind, and thus he loses his good sense and cannot appreciate the glories of great personalities. Lord Shiva speaking to his wife. Purport: it may be argued that since Daksha was very learned, wealthy, and austere, and had descended from a very exalted heritage, how could he be unnecessarily angry towards another? The answer is that when the qualities of good education, good parentage, beauty, and sufficient wealth are misplaced in a person who is puffed up by all these possessions, they produce a very bad result. Milk is a very nice food, but when milk is touched by an envious serpent, it becomes poisonous. Similarly, material assets such as education, wealth, beauty, and good parentage are undoubtedly nice, but when they decorate persons of a malicious nature, then they act adversely. Another example given by Chanakya Pandit is that a serpent that has a jewel on its head is still fearful because it is a serpent. A serpent by nature is envious of other living entities, even though they be faultless. When a serpent bites another creature, it is not necessarily because the other creature is at fault. It is the habit of the serpent to bite innocent creatures. Similarly, although Daksha was qualified by many material assets, because he was proud of his possessions and because he was envious, all those qualities were polluted. It is sometimes, therefore, detrimental for a person advancing in spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness to possess such material assets. Kunti Devi, while offering prayers to Krishna, addressed him as a Kinchana Gochara, one who is easily approached by those who are bereft of all material acquisitions. Material exhaustion is an advantage for advancement in Krishna consciousness. Although if one is conscious of his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can utilize his material assets, such as great learning and beauty and exalted ancestry, for the service of the Lord. Then such assets become glorious. In other words, unless one is Krishna conscious, all his material possessions are zero. But when this zero is by the side of the Supreme One, it at once increases in value to 10. Unless situated by the side of the Supreme One, 0 is always 0. Unless one is situated by the side of the Supreme One, 0 is always 0. One can add 100 zeros, but the value will still remain 0. Unless one's material assets are used in Krishna consciousness, they may play havoc and degrade the possessor. 18. One should not go to anyone's house, even on the consideration of his being a relative or a friend, when the man is disturbed in his mind and looks upon the guest with raised eyebrows and angry eyes. Purport: however low a person may be, he is never unkind to his children, wife, and nearest kin. Even a tiger is kind to his cubs, for within the animal kingdom the cubs are treated very nicely. Since Sati was the daughter of Daksha, however cruel and contaminated he might be, naturally it was expected that he would receive her very nicely. But here it is indicated by the word anavastita that such a person cannot be trusted. Tigers are very kind to their cubs, but it is also known that sometimes they eat them. Malicious persons should not be malicious persons should not be trusted because they are always unsteady. Thus Sati was advised not to go to her father's house, because to accept such a father as a relative and to go to his house without being properly invited was not suitable. 19. Lord Shiva continued, if one is hurt by the arrows of an enemy, he is not as aggrieved as when he is cut by the unkind words of a relative, for such grief continues to rend his heart day and night. Purport. Sati may have concluded that she would take the risk of going to her father's house, and even if her father spoke unkindly against her, she would be tolerant, as a son sometimes tolerates the reproaches of his parents. But Lord Shiva reminded her that she would not be able to tolerate such unkind words, because natural psychology dictates that one can suffer harm from an enemy and not mind so much, because pain inflicted by an enemy is natural. But when one is hurt by the strong words of a relative, he suffers the effects continually, day and night. And sometimes the injury becomes so intolerable that one commits suicide. 20. My dear white-complexioned wife, it is clear that of the many daughters of Daksha, you are the pet, yet you will not be honored at his house because of your being my wife. Rather, you will be sorry that you are connected with me. Purport. Lord Shiva put forward the argument that even if Sati proposed to go alone, without her husband, still she would not be received well because she was his wife. There was every chance of a catastrophe, even if she wanted to go alone. Therefore, Lord Shiva indirectly requested her not to go to her father's house. One who is conducted by false ego and is thus always distressed, both mentally and sensually, cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. And, being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. The real reason for the enmity between Lord Shiva and Daksha is explained here. Daksha was envious of Lord Shiva because of his high position as an incarnation of a quality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because he was directly in contact with the Supersoul and was therefore honored and given a better sitting place than him. There were many other reasons also. Daksha, being materially puffed up, could not tolerate the high position of Lord Shiva, so his anger at Lord Shiva's not standing up in his presence was only the final manifestation of his envy. Lord Shiva is always in meditation and always perceives the Supersoul, as expressed here by the words Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam. The position of one whose intelligence is always absorbed in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very great and cannot be imitated by anyone, especially an ordinary person. When Daksha entered the arena of Yajna, Lord Shiva was in meditation and might not have seen Daksha enter. But Daksha took the opportunity to curse him because he had maintained an envious attitude towards Lord Shiva, for a long time. Those who are actually self-realized see every individual body as a temple of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Paramatma feature is residing in everyone's body. When one offers respect to the body, it is not to the material body, but to the presence of the Supreme Lord. Thus, one who is always in meditation upon the Supreme Lord is always offering him obeisances. But since Daksha was not very elevated, he thought that obeisances were offered to the material body. And because Lord Shiva did not offer respect to his material body, Daksha became envious. Such persons, being unable to rise to the standard of self-realized souls like Lord Shiva, are always envious. The example given here is very suitable. Asuras, demons, or atheists are always envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They simply want to kill him. Even in this age, we find some so-called scholars commenting on Bhagavad Gita who are envious of Krishna. When Krishna says, Manvara bhavamad bhakto, at Bhagavad Gita 18.65, always think of me, become my devotee, and surrender to me, the so-called scholars comment that it is not to Krishna that we have to surrender. That is envy. The asuras or atheists, the demons, without reason or cause, are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, instead of offering respect to self-realized persons, foolish men who cannot approach the highest standard of self-realization are always envious, although there is no reason. 22. My dear young wife, certainly friends and relatives offer mutual greetings by standing up, welcoming one another and offering obeisances. But those who are elevated to the transcendental platform, being intelligent, offer such respects to the supersoul who is sitting within the body, not to the person identified with the body. Purport. It may be argued that since Daksha was the father-in-law of Lord Shiva, it was certainly the duty of Lord Shiva to offer him respect. In answer to that argument, it is explained here that when a learned person stands up or offers obeisances and welcome, he offers respect to the supersoul who is sitting within everyone's heart. It is seen, therefore, among Vaishnavas that even when a disciple offers obeisances to a spiritual master, the spiritual master immediately returns the obeisances because they are mutually offered, not to the body but to the supersoul. Therefore, the spiritual master also offers respect to the supersoul situated in the body of the disciple. The Lord says in Srimad Bhagavatam that offering respect to his devotee is more valuable than offering respect to himself. Devotees do not identify with the body, so offering respect to a Vaishnava means offering respect to Vishnu. It is stated also that, as a matter of etiquette, as soon as one sees a Vaishnava, he must immediately offer him respect, indicating the supersoul sitting within. A Vaishnava sees the body as a temple of Vishnu. Since Lord Shiva had already offered respect to the supersoul in Krishna consciousness, offering respect to Daksha, who identified with his body, was already performed. There was no need to offer respect to his body because that is not directed by any Vedic injunction. 23. I am always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva. Sattvam Vishudham Vasudeva Shabditam Yadiyate Tatra Puman Apavrita Sadve Tasmin Bhagavan Vasudevo Hridat Yatoksajo Me Namasa Vidiyate. I am always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness. And in that consciousness, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering. Purport. The living entity is constitutionally pure. Asango hyatmayam purusha. That's different from usual. Sango hyatmayam purusha. In the Vedic literature, it is said that the soul is always pure and uncontaminated by material attachment. The identification of the body with the soul is due to misunderstanding. As soon as one is fully Krishna conscious, it is to be understood that he is in his pure original constitutional position. This state of existence is called Shuddhasattva, which means that it is transcendental to material qualities. Since this Shuddhasattva existence is under the direct action of the internal potency, in this state the activities of material consciousness stop. For example, when iron is put into fire, it becomes warm. And when it is red hot, although it is iron, it acts like fire. Similarly, when copper is surcharged with electricity, its action as copper stops. It acts as electricity. It is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that anyone who engages in unadulterated devotional service to the Lord is at once elevated to the position of pure Brahman. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Therefore, Shuddhasattva, as described in this verse, is the transcendental position which is technically called Vasudeva. Vasudeva is also the name of the person from whom Krishna appears. This verse explains that the pure state is called Vasudeva because in that state, Vasudeva, Supreme Personality of Godhead, is revealed without any covering. To execute unadulterated devotional service, therefore, one must follow the rules and regulations of devotional service without desire to gain material profit by fruit of activities or mental speculation. In pure devotional service, one simply serves the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a matter of duty, without reason and without being impeded by material conditions. That is called Shuddha or Vasudeva. Because in that stage, the Supreme Person Krishna is revealed in the heart of the devotee. Srila Jiva Goswami has very nicely described this Vasudeva or Shuddha in his Bhagavat Sandarbha. He explains that Ashtotara Shata 108 is added to the name of the spiritual master to indicate one who is situated in Shuddha or in the transcendental state of Vasudeva. The word Vasudeva is also used for other purposes. For example, Vasudeva also means one who is everywhere or all-pervading. The sun is also called Vasudeva Shabditam. The word Vasudeva may be utilized for different purposes, but whatever purpose we adopt, Vasudeva means the all-pervading or localized Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita it is also stated, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Bhagavad Gita 7.19. Factual realization is to understand Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and surrender unto Him. Vasudeva is the field where Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is revealed. When one is free from the contamination of material nature and is situated in pure Krishna consciousness, or in the Vasudeva state, Vasudeva, the Supreme Person, is revealed. This state is also called Kaivalya, which means pure consciousness. Jnanam Sat Vikam Kaivalyam. When one is situated in pure transcendental knowledge, that is called Kaivalya. Therefore, Vasudeva also means Kaivalya, a word which is generally used by impersonalists. Impersonalist Kaivalya is not the last stage of realization, but in Krishna consciousness Kaivalya, when one understands, impersonal Kaivalya is not the last stage of realization, but in Krishna consciousness Kaivalya, when one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he is successful. Did that sentence make sense? Impersonal Kaivalya is not the last stage of realization, but in Krishna consciousness Kaivalya, when one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he is successful. It works for you? I'm all alone. In that pure state, by hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., because of the development of knowledge of the science of Krishna, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All these activities are under the guidance of the internal energy of the Supreme Lord. The action of the internal potency is also described in this verse as apavrata, free from any covering, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, His name, His form, His quality, His paraphernalia, etc., are beyond material nature, being transcendental. It is not possible to understand any one of them with the materialistic senses. When the senses are purified by the discharge of pure devotional service, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhaktir Uchite, the pure senses can see Krishna without covering. Now one may inquire that since factually the devotee has the same material existential body, how is it possible that the same materialistic eyes become purified by devotional service? The example as stated by Lord Chaitanya is that devotional service cleanses the mirror of the mind. In a clean mirror one can see his face very distinctly. Similarly, simply by cleansing the mirror of the mind, one can have a clear conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena, by executing one's prescribed duties in devotional service, Chetasananyagamina, Bhagavad Gita 8.8, or simply by hearing about God and chanting about Him. If one's mind is always engaged in chanting and hearing, and it is not allowed to go elsewhere, one can realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. as confirmed by Lord Chaitanya by the Bhakti Yoga process, beginning from hearing and chanting, one can cleanse the heart and mind, and thus one can clearly see the face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Shiva said that since his heart was always filled with the conception of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of his presence within his mind and heart, he was always offering obeisances unto him. In other words, Lord Shiva is always in trance, samadhi. This samadhi is not under the control of the devotee. It is under the control of Vasudeva, for the entire internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead acts under his order. Of course, the material nature also acts by his order, but his direct will is specifically executed through the spiritual energy. Thus, by his spiritual energy, he reveals himself. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Sambhavam Yatmamaya, Bhagavad Gita 4.6. Atmamaya means internal potency. By his sweet will, he reveals himself by his internal potency, being satisfied by the transcendental loving service of the devotee. The devotee never commands, "My dear Lord, please come here so that I can see you." It is not the position of the devotee to command the Supreme Personality of Godhead to come before him or to dance before him. There are so many so-called devotees who command the Lord to come before them dancing. The Lord, however, is not subject to anyone's command. But if he is satisfied by one's pure devotional activities, he reveals himself. Therefore, a meaningful word in this verse is a doksaja, for it indicates that the activities of our material senses will fail to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by the attempt of his speculative mind. But if one desires, he can subdue all the material activities of his senses, and by manifesting his spiritual energy, the Lord can reveal himself to the pure devotee. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead reveals himself to the pure devotee, the devotee has no other duty than to offer him respectful obeisances. The Absolute Truth reveals himself to the devotee in his form. He is not formless. Vasudeva is not formless because it is stated in this verse that as soon as the Lord reveals himself, the devotee offers his obeisances. Obeisances are offered to a person, not to anything impersonal. One should not accept the Mayavadi interpretation that Vasudeva is impersonal. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, prapadyante, one surrenders. One surrenders to a person, not to impersonal non-duality. Whenever there is a question of surrendering or offering obeisances, there must be an object of surrender or obeisances. Text 24. Therefore, you should not see your father, although he is the giver of your body, because he and his followers are envious of me. Because of his envy, O most worshipful one, he has insulted me with cruel words, although I am innocent. Purport. For a woman, both the husband and the father are equally worshipable. The husband is the protector of a woman during her youthful life, whereas the father is her protector during her childhood. Thus both are worshipable, but especially the father because he is the giver of the body. Lord Shiva reminded Sati, your father is undoubtedly worshipable even more than I am, but take care, for although he is the giver of your body, he may also be the taker of your body, because when you see your father, because of your association with me, he may insult you. An insult from a relative is worse than death, especially when one is well situated. Text 25. In spite of this instruction, you decide to go. If in spite of this instruction you decide to go, neglecting my words, the future will not be good for you. You are most respectable, and when you are insulted by your relative, it will immediately be equal to death. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 3rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Talks Between Lord Shiva and Sati. Bravissimo! Sadhu, sadhu. Okay. What'd you hear? What are your realizations, questions, expansions? Chakadola.
We have 2-3 questions online.
2-3 questions online. Oh, this is nice, so nice.
First one is Ganga Siva Mata. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. How can we not lose temper in relationship with others?
With who? With others.
And do not become like Daksha.
Well, one thing is to go on Sankirtan, because there you get a lot of practice. And you get immediate feedback from your environment. When you're trying to distribute books, it's like a biofeedback machine. I once saw a biofeedback machine in a class I took at San Francisco State University called psychosomatic optimization. It was in the psychology department. And the teacher showed us the biofeedback machine. It hooks up to various vital parts of your body, and then you can control your mood, and you'll notice that all the vitals go down. And people practice that. They're able to bring down their sense of anger or anxiety by being hyper aware of how the body's reacting to the way they're thinking. Because there's this loop that the mind perceives something and then the body reacts to it. And then when the mind sees the body react, it reinforces that it's something that is scary or anxiety worthy. And then it goes in this endless loop. So if you're able to see the difference between those two. And I've always said that preaching, going out into public, is very helpful for that, because then you learn, just like with a biofeedback machine, to control yourself when you're talking to people. Mostly, it's what we were talking about before, is to not react when there's provocation. It disarms people, actually, because everyone's always expecting some sort of a squabble. And I remember I was with Ruchi in the Philadelphia airport, and some guy came along and said, "You guys should get out of here." And we go, "Now?" And he goes, "Get out." And we said, "Okay, we're leaving." And we just turned around and started running away. And sort of just interacting with the public over and over again is helpful. Pardon me?
What was his reaction?
I don't know, but we were in stitches. Because it's just so funny.
Mukharvinda Prabhu asked, what should Nandi do when his spiritual master was insulted?
What should somebody do when one spiritual master is insulted?
In case of Shiva, it was Nandi who cursed Brahmanas.
In case of Shiva, it was nothing? Oh, Nandishwar. Well, you should understand the mood of the spiritual master. There's Shastra conjunction that you should be able to defeat somebody with logic and Shastra. And if that's not possible, you should kill them. And if you can't do that, then you should leave. And Prabhupada said we shouldn't kill people. We should kill their demoniac spirit. So in a practical way, we shouldn't necessarily escalate. I think it's one of the lessons from this is to not escalate by taking the same unreasonable stance and just becoming, as is mentioned in the Krishna book, several demons approached Krishna armed only with their red hot anger. I mean, there are ways to communicate with people even that are inimical, but we're advised not to do so in general. Ishvare tadadineshu baliseshu tu satsacha prema maitri kipopeksha yakaroti samajima. That verse relates to how to deal with different kinds of people, and one of them is the person who's envious. But it's in the commentary there that even if a devotee is of bad character, we we can be aloof from such a person also.
And
Didn't answer the question very much, but go ahead.
and the last one is from Veena Singh. I am little confused. Is Shivaji one of the 11 Rudras born from the forehead of Brahmaji? And is he the same as Lord Shiva, the annihilator of the universe?
You're not alone, because Shiva Tattva and Guru Tattva are the two hardest tattvas to understand. Can you ask the question again? Is Shiva one of the 11 Rudras? Anybody have an answer to that? We'll make it a research question and get back to you about the technicalities of Lord Shiva. Yes?
Well, I had a related question. We may check if indeed he's the Rudra and therefore, but Prabhupada says he's self-realized, but still because of the proximity or the touch with the mode of ignorance, he felt sorry. So that's kind of bewildering to be self-realized. But my question is can we conclude from that you can be self-realized and because of being in the material environment can experience material emotion?
Well, he is self-realized. Sapvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Yariyate Tatra Pumana Pavrita. That verse we just read. So he's always seeing the Lord face to face. But we find that in various kinds of services, there are various kinds of implications. I mean, look at Akrura. He was just minding his own beeswax, and then he went to Vrindavan. And Jiva Goswami says he was affected by the anger of the residents of Vrindavan. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says there were other reasons, but Kritavarma also. He was a pure devotee. He associated with Kamsa because they were both in the Bhoja dynasty, so there was some of it rubbed off on him. That's just the way it goes. Yes?
Another basic question, Guru Maharaj. Here in one of the purports, it's stated that other demigods are all obedient servants of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, Lord Vishnu is never satisfied without them. So, many times this question is asked, and it's stated here that Lord is not satisfied without them. So, why don't we include them in the worship?
Well, we do, and that's what's being explained in this whole section, is that when you worship Krishna, then the demigods are automatically included. And then it said almost what sounded like the opposite, which is that unless they're there, then you can't satisfy Lord Vishnu because they should also be worshipped at the same time. That's why when we say the second offense, we say one should not consider them equal to or independent of. And we do worship the demigods, but only in relationship to our devotional service. Prabhupada mentions that frequently in the Krishna book. The devotees would worship, or the gopis worship Katyayani because they wanted Krishna as a husband. So they're devotees. So we should be respectful to them and see their connection to Krishna. But we shouldn't also think that they're separate and that we should go through them. Sometimes people think we need karmakanda or we need some kind of extra thing in order to actually approach Krishna. But Nayam Sukapa Bhagavan Dehinam Gopikasata Gyaninam Chatmabhutanam Yata Bhakti Matam Miha. Nothing succeeds like success, and real success is performing direct devotional service to Krishna, and then everyone else is satisfied. But if the demigods, therefore, the demigods should be seen in relationship to Krishna. And when we talk about demigods, sometimes we have an image of, as the second canto of the Bhagavatam says, what is that verse? Samsritim Gaura. No. Partivatara no dumas tasmeragnis. What's the verse? Divinity and divine service. He rejects the horrible and ghastly forms of the demigods. But demigods also means they're elevated devotees in the universe that are along with the Lord. And I gave that example earlier of Shrutadev when he was worshiping the Lord at his house, and the Lord stopped him from glorifying him and said, "No, you should glorify the sages, not me. It's too much, especially in their presence." Mumukshavo Gaura Rupam Hitvabuta Padinata Narayana Kalashanta Bhajanti Yanasuyava means that he respects all. That verse says he respects all. Mumukshavo Gaura Rupan Hitva Bhuta Patinata Narayana Kalashanta Bhajanti Yanasuyava. He's not envious of anybody, but he doesn't go for out of self-interest to the various forms of the demigods. Yes, Prabhu?
I have a question.
Yes.
With regard to approaching the demigods, we hear that we shouldn't, you're just saying now that we shouldn't go to the demigods without, we hear that we should pray to the spiritual master. So I came across one devotee who said that I am only a devotee who's initiated, and they said they're worshipping Lord Shiva as a devotee of Vishnu. So what would you say in that case? Because there's a danger of deviating. Because
that's the main point is Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. When we see Lord Shiva as a Vaishnav and we worship him in that light, then that's perfectly legal. When you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, you'll find that Lord Chaitanya traveled all over South India. He went to all kinds of devas. And he offers respect, but it was in the spirit of they're all connected to Krishna. Rukmini worshipped, of course it was her family tradition. The devotees in Dwarka during the Shamantaka jewel episode, when Krishna went out to clear his name, he found that Prasenna had been killed, horse killed, jewel was gone, looked like a lion got it. Then it looked like the lion got pulverized. They thought, what happened there? And then there was a cave, so Krishna went in the dark cave, and his expedition his party stayed outside and waited for him for many days. Didn't come back. Pretty scary. They went back into Dwarka and they performed a special sacrifice to Kali or to Durga to get Krishna back. And just when they finished the yajna, Krishna came walking back into town with the jewel and with Jambavati. So there's so many instances. It's all a matter of if one sees that the demigods are independent or separate from Krishna and tries to worship them for some materialistic purpose. That's what Krishna calls hrita jnana. It's distorted intelligence, and it's a vidhi purvakam. It's wrongly done. It's against the regulations. But if one sees demigods as connected to Krishna, like Shiva, it's, he's a great devotee, Vaishnavanam Yuta Shambhu, and they worship him as a great devotee, which we do. We quote from Lord Shiva, we worship Lord Shiva because he's a great devotee. Even Sanatana Goswami, you go visit his temple, he worshipped Lord Shiva. In fact, Lord Shiva is the protector of the Dham. You can't enter the Dham without the permission of Lord Shiva. Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. So it's all a matter of the consciousness of how we see Lord Shiva and the demigods. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Prabhu? I saw you raise your hand, right, Nanda? Okay, I'll come to you next.
I'll be fast. I just was thinking in Chaitanya Bhagavat, there's like a pastime where
Hold that closer, please.
In Chaitanya Bhagavat, I was hearing Lord Chaitanya goes to see Pashupatinath, I think, and there's like a whole scene where Pashupatinath like welcomes him, and Parvati, they cook like a feast for him, and they have like a whole thing, which is nice. And then the other thing, I just want to make a quick comment. I mean, it's a very basic thing. It's very basic, but I was appreciating that line. If one's mind is always engaged in chanting and hearing and is not allowed to go elsewhere, one can realize Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's sort of an interesting realization to have doing a program like this where you're just chanting and hearing like straight through the entire day. And you made this point also in your Make Japa Great Again, that the mind kind of thinks, okay, now I deserve a break. Like I've done so much devotional service and it was so intense. I distributed so many books, whatever, and now like I should have a break. But that's the opposite of what tapas means. Tapas means we should always stay in this fire, like all the time, if we can somehow engage ourselves like that.
Yeah, nice. Of course, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, yukta hara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapna vabodasya, yoga bhavati dukkha. Shows to be balanced in your life. Yes, there are marathons and so forth, but read in the Mahabharata, even Krishna and the Pandavas took a break here and there. They go to some resort or something like that in the woods. And we should be balanced. You got to be balanced in body, mind, and soul. So it's not Maya to go for a walk or something. See a tree. You could see Krishna there too. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
So,
Krishna.
Text 19. Okay, 19. Lord Shiva continued, if one is hurt by the arrows of an enemy, one is not as aggrieved as when cut by the unkind words of a relative, for such grief continues to rend one's heart day and night. So the nuances of that, it's very interesting, and we've touched upon it a little bit, but I'd like to explore it a little bit more, because third canto, when Vidura's giving advice to Dhritarashtra and Duryodhan hears and then says, who is this person? He's just the son of a kept maidservant. Toss him out of the house. So Vidura's reaction, he was affected, but he decided not to act on that. He saw the internal potency acting for him to get disentangled from the palace politics, and he saw the external potency working to drag Duryodhan down further and further. And he just, left the bow on the door and left, and then heard Bhagavatam. So when you also mentioned Shamantaka jewel story, so when Krishna was insulted or whatever, when he heard, when there was inference that he actually was a part of killing Prasenna because he wanted the jewel and this and that, he wanted to clear his reputation. Thanks. His reputation. So it's like, it's not that and also there was a comment on how it's interesting that someone can be self-realized and still be affected. Even then with Maharaj Rahugana and insulting Jad Bharat when he was carrying the palanquin, he was affected, but he calmed his mind. So it's not that we're not persons and we don't react when there's insult or harsh words, but it's how one reacts to that. Do you have any comments or clarifications on that?
it's an excellent point, because we're not unfeeling, we're not robotic, and there are ways in which, in the Shastra, even at the end of Kurukshetra, Yudhishthira was disconsolate, and they performed the rituals for the departed, and they were sad, and Krishna was leading those ceremonies, and all the other references you made to Jad Bharat and so forth. So there is a way that devotees process things. In fact, even we read earlier when Vidura met Uddhava at the Jamuna in Vrindavan, the Mashala Leela had already occurred, and the family members were all killed. And Vidura had already heard about it, but then he inquired from Uddhava, and he said, "So, how are they?" And Prabhupada said, "This may sound queer because he already knew about it." So he said, so it was psychological, not practical. Why he asked him that, he was still processing it. Even Krishna processes things, because you find when the coward boys are walking into the mouth of Aghasura, he's going like, "Wait, what? How come they're going in the mouth of a snake?" And he just thinks, the way my energies are working is pretty amazing here. He has to go and save him and bring him back to life from walking into the mouth of a big demon. So everyone processes. Prabhu?
It was mentioned that Daksha did not invite Brahma or Shiva. Now, there was different explanations. I think Acharya said that Brahma knew what's going to happen, and that's why he didn't show up.
Mm-hmm.
But Prabhupada mentioned that Daksha didn't invite him. Why would he not invite Brahma? I mean, Brahma is the one that appointed him as to his high position, so why would he not?
Well, it was in the context
Brahma?
of that paragraph. He became puffed up because he thought that he was independent. Happens a lot. Somebody gets empowered by somebody, and then they get power, and then they think, "What do I need you for?" And they become a mouse. Punarmusika bhava. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? I mean, we've seen it so many times, or maybe been through it. Sometimes somebody gets empowered by somebody, and then they become an ingrate. They forget how they got there in the first place, and then they think, like, I'm the one. I'm the main person. What do I need them for? They try to cut them out of the whole thing. I was thinking too about reacting to things. Devotees' reaction is different because there's a way that when devotees process things, they're doing on the basis of protecting Krishna, and it's not based on the false ego that I've been offended. And there's a difference, because although there's a reaction, there's this, and because the material world is turbulent, and there are various ways in which we're confronted by that turbulence, there is a way that devotees are disturbed for Krishna. I probably became angry in certain circumstances because his movement was being attacked. And he mentions that in the 10th canto, 2nd chapter, when he's talking about how Devaki was fearful of Kamsa. And Prabhupada said, we're also fearful of Kamsa-like people, paraphrasing, attacking our movement. And then he talks about how that fear, processing the fear of losing one's Krishna consciousness, or in the case of Devaki, of losing Krishna to Kamsa, said that burns up all of the last vestiges of attachment to the material world. Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Mada, Moha, Mada, and Matsarya. Those are the 6 Garbhasuras that took birth. They represented all those. And the fear that Devaki had represented how they were killed. They were killed off. So he said, he probably quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, said that we should be afraid. And Prahlad says it too in the 7th canto, 9th chapter, where he says, Trastosmaham kripana vatsala dusahogra. He says, Lord Nrsingadeva, I'm not afraid of you. Everybody else is. In fact, all the elephants are running away because you're loud roaring. He says, well, what I'm afraid of is your Maya, your Vishnu Maya. And so the fear's there, but for materialists, they're afraid for illusory reasons, or they're angry for illusory reasons. And there's a way that devotees process things and react. They react to things and process them, but it's in a different context, right? It's not false ego. Yes, go ahead. Any other things? Okay, here we go. Yes.
About the demigods, about offering them respect. I was thinking during the yajna when we chant Brahma Samhita, it's like all the demigods are
Covers
present
everything. Prabhupada writes in the purport after Lord Chaitanya found the Brahma Samhita in the Adikeshava temple, and he brought it. He said, "I'm giving this to everybody." He had it copied, and he gave it to all his devotees. And then in the purport, it said that you properly propitiate every one of the devas. They're all included in there, but in the right context. Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. That's the proper way. Good one. Okay, we got a few more minutes, so let's get started with Sati quits her body. What do you say? Haribol. Okay, chapter 4, page 109, over our quota for the day. We're in the cream. The sage Maitreya said, Lord Shiva was silent after speaking to Sati, seeing her between decisions. Sati was very much anxious to see her relatives at her father's house. But at the same time, she was afraid of Lord Shiva's warning. Her mind unsettled, she moved in and out of the room as a swing moves this way and that. Cognitive dissonance. Purport. Sati's mind was divided about whether to go to her father's house or obey the orders of Lord Shiva. The struggle between the two decisions was so strong that she was pushed from one side of the room to another. And she began to move just like the pendulum of a clock. Sati felt very sorry at being forbidden to go to see her relatives at her father's house, and due to affection for them, tears fell from her eyes. Shaking and very much afflicted, she looked at her uncommon husband, Lord Shiva, as if she were going to blast him with her vision. Purport. Purport. The word apratipurusham used in this verse means one who has no equal. Lord Shiva has no equal in the material world in regard to equality towards everyone. His wife Sati knew that her husband was equal towards everyone. So why in this case was he so unkind to his wife that he did not allow her to go to her father's house? This distressed her more than she could tolerate, and she looked at her husband as if she were ready to blast him with her vision. In other words, since Lord Shiva is the Atma, Shiva also means Atma, it is indicated here that Sati was prepared to commit suicide. Another meaning of the word apratipurusha is the personality who has no rival. Since Lord Shiva could not be persuaded to give her permission, Sati took shelter of a woman's last weapon, weeping, which forces a husband to agree to the proposal of his wife. Text number 3. Thereafter Sati left her husband, Lord Shiva, who had given her half his body due to affection, and breathing very heavily because of anger and bereavement, she went to the house of her father. This less intelligent act was due to her being a weak woman. Purport. According to the Vedic conception of family life, the husband gives half his body to his wife, and the wife gives half of her body to her husband. In other words, a husband without a wife or a wife without a husband is incomplete. The Vedic marital relationship existed between Lord Shiva and Sati, but sometimes due to weakness, a woman becomes very attracted by the members of her father's house, and this happened to Sati. In this verse, it is specifically mentioned that she wanted to leave such a great husband as Shiva because of her womanly weakness. In other words, womanly weakness exists even in the relationship between husband and wife. Generally, separation between husband and wife is due to womanly behavior. Divorce takes place due to womanly weakness. The best course for a woman is to abide by the orders of her husband. That makes family life very peaceful. Sometimes there may be misunderstandings between husband and wife, as found even in an elevated family relationship as that of Sati and Lord Shiva. But a wife should not leave her husband's protection because of such a misunderstanding. As she does so, it is understood to be due to her womanly weakness. Just a counterbalancing point is that Prabhupada points out elsewhere that if the husband becomes unqualified then and is impeding the a woman on the path of Krishna consciousness, then it's her duty that she should leave. 4. When they saw Sati leaving alone very rapidly, thousands of Lord Shiva's disciples, headed by Maniman and Mada, quickly followed her with his bull, Nandi, in front and accompanied by the Yakshas. Sati was going very fast so that she might not be checked by her husband, but she was immediately followed by the many thousands of disciples of Lord Shiva, headed by Yakshas, Maniman, and Mada. The word gata vyata, used in this connection means without fear. Sati did not care that she was going alone. Therefore, she was almost fearless. The word anuchara is also significant, for it indicates that Lord Shiva's disciples were always ready to sacrifice anything for Lord Shiva. All of them could understand the desire of Shiva, who did not want Sati to go alone. Anuchara means those who can immediately understand the purpose of their master. It's just going back to Mukarvinda Prabhu's question of what the duty of a disciple. Really, I just heard Prabhupada this morning saying that first he was talking about how chanting Hare Krishna is sufficient, but he said you must learn the philosophy to be able to defeat others or to teach them authoritatively. And it's important for a disciple to understand the mission of the spiritual master, and also, of course, the spiritual master mission is according to the Shastra and the Guru Parampara, and one should be able to defend that. One should be expert enough to defend that against detractors. And that's part of the duty, so that if there's some disparagement against the representative who's the leader, then the followers should have developed such an expertise that they can defeat the person. That's the first class thing that should be done. Then, of course, there's a case I read about in a book, How to Win an Argument, by a professor from York University in New York. And he talked about how there's different kinds of arguing. And then he gave the case of fanatics. And he said, here's how you deal with fanatic. And then you turn the page and there was one word, don't. And calumny, when people utter untruths in order to defame somebody, if you enter into it and you're not expert enough, it just makes it worse. Some people are, hell-bent on just, they've lost all sense of restraint, and they just have this sense of envy, and they want to criticize others, so then they go about it wholeheartedly. And that's their livelihood, basically. So sometimes when they're fanatical like that, engaging more, especially on the internet, can become an endless proposition. It becomes tit for tat. Very difficult to untangle such a situation. The disciples of Lord Shiva arranged for Sati to be on the back of a bull and gave her the bird which was her pet. They bore a lotus flower, a mirror, and all such paraphernalia for her enjoyment, and covered her with a great canopy. Followed by a singing party with drums, conch shells, and bugles, the entire procession was as pompous as a royal parade. She then reached her father's house, where the sacrifice was being performed, and entered the arena where everyone was chanting the Vedic hymns. What a party. The great sages, brahmanas, and demigods were all assembled there, and there were many sacrificial animals as well as pots made of clay, stone, gold, glass, and skin, which were all requisite for the sacrifice. Purport: when learned sages and brahmanas assembled to chant Vedic mantras, some of them also engage in arguing about the conclusion of the scriptures. Thus, some of the sages and brahmanas were arguing, and some of them were chanting the Vedic mantras. So the entire atmosphere was surcharged with transcendental sound vibration. This transcendental sound vibration has been simplified in the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In this age, no one is expected to be highly educated in the Vedic ways of understanding, because people are very slow, lazy, and unfortunate. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has recommended the sound vibration, Hare Krishna, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam it is also recommended, Yagnai Sankirtana Prayar Yajanti Sumedasa. At the present moment, it is impossible to gather sacrificial necessities because of the poverty of the population and their lack of knowledge in Vedic mantras. Therefore, for this age, it is recommended that people should gather together to chant the Hare Krishna mantra to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is accompanied by his associates. Indirectly, this indicates Lord Chaitanya, who is accompanied by his associates, Nityananda, Advaita, and others. That is the process for performing yajna in this age. Another significant point in the verse is that there were animals for sacrifice. That these animals were meant for sacrifice does not mean that they were meant to be killed. There were great sages and realized souls assembled who were performing yajnas, and their realization was tested by animal sacrifices, just as in modern scientists tests are made on animals to determine the effectiveness of a particular medicine. The brahmanas who were entrusted with the performance of yajna were very realized souls, and to test their realization, an old animal was offered in the fire and again rejuvenated. That was the test of the Vedic mantra. The animals gathered were not meant to be killed and eaten. The real purpose of a sacrifice was not to replace a slaughterhouse, but to test a Vedic mantra by giving an animal new life. Animals were used to test the power of Vedic mantras, not for meat. In our last verse, text number 7, when Sati with her followers reached the arena, because all the people assembled were afraid of Daksha, none of them received her well. No one welcomed her but her mother and sisters, who, with tears in their eyes and with glad faces, welcomed her and talked with her very pleasingly. Purport: the mother and sisters of Sati could not follow the others, who did not receive Sati very well. Due to natural affection, they immediately embraced her with tears in their eyes and with loving feelings. This shows that women as a class are very soft-hearted. Their natural affection and love cannot be checked by artificial means. Although the men present were very learned Brahmins and demigods, they were afraid of their superior, Daksha. And because they knew that their welcoming Sati would displease him, although in their minds they wanted to receive her, they could not do so. Women are naturally soft-hearted, but men are sometimes very hard-hearted. Just interesting the dynamics of the cult-like environment. That if there's a leader, so many people fall into place. Not saying, that's natural when there's a good leader, everyone should fall in place, but when there's a bad leader, then people fall into place and they're afraid of stepping out of line. Just thought of the brahmanas who were finally enlightened by their wives, who had gone immediately to Krishna, but then afterwards the brahmanas, although they became devotees, they were afraid to go out and demonstrate that they were devotees because they were still worried that Kamsa might see. They had that sense. And also just this, I mean, like the environment in which everyone's oppressed because of the wrong-headed way that the leader's acting. Because they all go there and then, she goes there and then they're afraid to say anything to go against Daksha. Any of the last comments? Yes.
It just struck me, the sentence that when Prabhupada explained what happened in the sound vibration, and some brahmanas were chanting Vedic hymns, others were arguing, and this is all transcendental by vibration, and it can be simplified by the transcendental vibration of Hare Krishna. So I thought, there's so many arguments, that they might be on spiritual topics, but it may never end, so you can simplify it just by chanting.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yes, Navina Prabhu.
Thank you. There's a lot of places where devotees are bringing up the same argument that, no, we can't go out and do Harinam or do books because it will really upset the government and the people and the view, and it won't be accepted. So what should be our response to that when we visit such a place? Just say, okay, well, that's your right to have that type of attitude, and you just go somewhere else, or try to inspire some people to do something, because often it's just not really warranted, it's not really justified. Often there are 2 or 3 different groups in the same city, and some of them do Harinam and books, but others say, no, this is really not the way how things are supposed to be done here. It's counterproductive.
Well, it depends on your strategy, because I adopted it. I recognized that, and I realized that I'd go to places to promote book distribution, and then I realized there was a glass ceiling because the leaders weren't into it. Although the Sankirtan devotees were like, come, and I go there, and then I realized, like, oh yeah, something's holding us back. And I realized that it was coming from maybe leadership or something like that, just as an example. So after some time, I felt that I developed a system called most likely to succeed, MLS. And I've made a form. And when people would say, why don't you come here, why don't you go there? I say, sure, you just fill out my form. It's the most likely to succeed form. So on it is very simple. It would say that if I'm to come there, then the temple council has to agree to meet with me and look at how they've done in book distribution and what the goal, what goal they would make. And it has to be a progressive goal to move forward. And also I have to have the consent of the advocacy of the local GBC. So if they're willing to set a goal amongst the local council and the GBC is also an advocate, then I'm happy to come. Otherwise, there's a lot of other places to go. And so that's a strategy, because if you like swimming upstream, you just go here, there, and everywhere. Yeah, and it's better. I mean, the number of people who are into it and willing and can actually expand what they're doing, expand the capacity exponentially is so great that we could stay busy just doing that. So again, it's a strategy, because you could say, well, no, but we have to fix the other places too. But, you could triage and say, we'll get to those later. Right? What is your opinion? Here, give him the microphone. This is the first time he's speaking in the assembly.
you kind of put a filter on it to see where's your time best spent, where can you have the most impact in inspiring the most amount of people to increase that aspect of their devotional service.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's it. Confirmed. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, dear Lord Shiva, if you so desire, please inspire us to increase our Krishna consciousness so we can come to Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam platform and be aware of you constantly. And please empower us to go on hearing the Bhagavatam through Kartik. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone who agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, whether you're in the room or outside, please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Gaur Premanande. Nitai Gaura Haribo. 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Nitai Gaura Haribo. 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Vanchakopadrisha Kripasanameva Patitanam Pavanivyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. So we'll start again tomorrow at 10:30, just after breakfast. Hare Krishna.